when you look at the times in the past, although some of the rulers were oppressive, they insisted on ruling by Islam, and they were unapologetic about it. And because of that refusal to apologize for being Muslim, those that were oppressive, although their creed was the same, they were oppressive, their creed was our creed, many of them, they had massive success. And they belonged to that category in Bukhari, where the Prophet ﷺ said in the Sahih of Bukhari that it may be the case at times that Allah supports the religion with a sinner, because some of them were certainly sinful. Now you have people today who don't have the right creed but an oily tongue. And we are sometimes amazed that 20 people came forward, 30 people came forward. I'm giving you 200,000 from people who have our same creed, who are Sunnis like us, but were fasiq because they stole your property, or they took things from you, or they took your money, or they killed the ulama. But they have our same creed and they got 200,000 in a year. These jokers today would never get 200,000 in a year. They don't get 2,000. They don't get 1,000. And that's an important lesson for us to understand regarding these people. Now in 350 AH, Mu'izz ad-Dawla had a massive building constructed for administration at a cost of some 2 million dinar. 2 million dinar. A dinar is like a half a dirham, and a dirham is 14 pounds. Multiply that by 2 million. That will give you how much he spent to build that building. Because remember, back then, people didn't build on credit. There were no credit banks, there were no interest lending banks, there were no inflated economies. He had that money that was coming from his own wealth or the wealth of the treasury. So people could build with billions, millions, whatever they needed to build, they could get it done and not have to worry about promissory notes, or the bank says that they had to close the account because they were unsure where the money was coming from. So we just closed the account, we weren't sure. And then you've got to go down and speak to the bank and say, why did you close my account? We weren't sure where the sources were, somewhere in the Middle East. They didn't have to worry about that. They just carried out the transaction, did it, and had it built. It would be in the same year that the first Khalifa of Andalus and the first to be given the title leader of the believers, Amirul Mu'mineen, died. His name was Abdul Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Marwani. He had governed for 5 years. Thereafter, his son, the second Andalusian Khalifa, Al-Mustansir Billah, came to power. So the Khalifas of Andalus, now they're having their own system. And they're taking on their own names, Al-Mustansir or Ad-Dakhil or things like this. They have their own people now. And we'll see, inshallah, as we go along, the Khalifas of Andalus going alongside of those of Baghdad. And when the Khalifa in Baghdad was ultimately cut down and killed by the Mongols, and it cut off the Khilafah in Baghdad, it continued in Andalus. Islam continued rolling along in Andalus. Now, deaths in this year include Abu Walid al-Naysaburi, who was the head of the Shafi'is in Naysabur, Abu Ali al-Tabari, who was the head of the Shafi'is in Baghdad, and Abu Sa'ib al-Hamdani, who was the Qadi of Azerbaijan, and Hamdan for Shafi'is. During this time, the strength of the Shafi'is began to turn slightly. Because this area, Azerbaijan and Hamdan and Naysabur, were Central Asian areas. And people mainly, especially Afghanistan, the people that were becoming Muslim were primarily going into the Shafi'i fiqh, because there was still an association that Hanafi meant Mu'tazila. But as Abu Mansur al-Maturidi's da'wah to the Orthodox creed began to permeate further, you started to see a shift of the Central Asian people away from the Shafi'i school into the Hanafi school, because of the fact that they held that the Hanafi school in its complexity was able to deal with more of the issues that they needed sought. They didn't feel that the Shafi'i school was able to properly accommodate some of the more complex public and social issues that they were going through. And so you started to see changes in this year in which massive amounts of Central Asian peoples started turning to the Hanafi school as an alternative to the Shafi'i school And today, when you look at how people learn Hanafi fiqh in Central Asia, to say the Arab world, they've developed their own curriculum. And part of the reason for that is, when Abu Mansur al-Maturidi came, and later Abu Hafs al-Nasafi with the Creed books, and Sa'aduddin al-Taftazani, these were Central Asian Hanafis, these were not Arabs. So they had to think in light of the battles that they had in Central Asia, and to organize the madhab in a slightly different way. And so the Hanafis that, say, studied in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, those places, their fiqh has developed on a level that is different to how the Hanafis that were Arabs developed their fiqh. And you can see it within the books that they've written, how rich a contribution the Central Asian Hanafis have given to the rest of the school. And how big an impact they had. In 351 AH, the Byzantine ruler, Dumustuk, died and left a vacuum in their power. The Shia in Baghdad again came to prominence, building their own state within Iraq with help from sympathetic people within the court of the Khalifa. They had it written on the doors of the masjids, notes cursing Muawiyah, Abu Bakr, and others. So in this time, the Shia became powerful, and they were able to do that by putting it on the doors of masjids, have signs indicating it, and the Sunnis were brought into battle with the Shia. Deaths in this year included Ahmed ibn Muhammad al-Naysaburi, who was the head judge of the Hanafis in the Haramain, Abu Ja'far al-Shaybani, and Abu Muhammad al-Naysaburi. In 352 AH, Mu'izz ad-Dawla, starting on the 10th of Muharram, had poetry and dirges of sadness and mourning sang for Al-Husayn ibn Ali radiallahu anhu, and decreed that the markets would be closed, stopped bakers and cooks from selling their products, and had the Shia women come out gyrating and slapping their faces in mourning and protest of what happened at Karbala. So now in this year, you had a governor within the state actually providing patronage to the Shia creed. And so now they were coming out into the fore and celebrating publicly. Previously, they had not been able to do that. They were not able to proclaim their creed publicly. They were not able to have public celebrations and processions. They were not able to sing their special dirges that they had. They were not able to do any of that. But in this time, they were able to come out. On the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, the Shia, for the first time in public in Baghdad, were able to celebrate Eid al-Ghadir Khum, where they believe Ali was proclaimed the Khalifa. Now, because of this, I've enclosed, as a reminder, the first sheet that we did for Abu Bakr's Khilafah. It's at the last of your papers. And it's the Hadith of Thaqalain al-Ghadir Khum. Now, I want to just read through this because it has to do with how the Shia view historical reality. This is taken from Imam Muslim's collection Al-Jami' al-Sahih. Zayd ibn Arqam mentioned that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ stood up one day to address the people at a watering hole between Mecca and Medina known as Ghadir Khum. He praised Allah a great deal and glorified Him much, and then said, "People, I am only a man like you, so there is coming to me the Messenger of your Lord, and I shall answer him shortly. I am leaving among you Thaqalain, two weighty things. The first is the Book of Allah. In it is the guidance, light, and light. So take hold of the Book of Allah and hold fast to it." He stressed that greatly and advised the people to it. He then said, "And my household is next. I remind you by Allah regarding my household, Ahlul Bayt. And my household is next. I remind you by Allah regarding my household. And my household is next. I remind you by Allah regarding my household." The companion Hussein asked Zayd ibn Arqam who they were, and whether or not his wives were classed in that category. Zayd said, "His wives are from the household, but the Ahlul Bayt are those who are forbidden to take zakah after him." Hussein asked who they were, to which Zayd ibn Arqam replied, "They are the families of Ali, Aqil, Ja'far, and Abbas." Hussein queried, "So all of these have been forbidden from taking zakah?" Zayd ibn Arqam said, yes, it is so. This is collected by Imam Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj in his Al-Jami' al-Sahih under the book of the virtues of the companions, under the chapter of the virtues of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It is this statement here and another narration within the same collection in which the Prophet ﷺ wrapped Ali's amama for him and held his hand among the people and said, whoever is wali to Ali is wali to me. And also another hadith that is in Sahih al-Jami' in which he said to Ali radiallahu anhu, you are in my place like the place of Harun to Musa alayhi salam. These are the reasons why the Shia celebrate what they call Eid al-Ghadir Khum, the Eid of Ghadir Khum, because they believe that Ali was proclaimed the Khalifa and the companions that went against him after that all apostated. So that's why they hold Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and most of the other 124,000 companions as apostates. Is because of that. Now, before moving on, we just need to include three things regarding this. Number one, the statement regarding Ghadir Khum doesn't at all support the position that the Shia have. Because the Shia understand from that point that Ali was proclaimed Khalifa. But no specific statement was made regarding Ali other than that he was the Mawla or the Wali. And the statement had been made previously. Also, we need to remember that the one who always led the Salah in the Prophet ﷺ's absence was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Second to this, when the people couldn't find Abu Bakr, they brought Umar ibn al-Khattab, not Ali. So we have to understand when speaking with someone who is Shia, how incredibly wrong they are on this issue, but at the same time to try to do so in a way in the hope to guide them. Secondly, the position regarding the hadith that you are to me like Harun is to Musa, all of the historians understand and know that the Prophet Harun alayhi salam died before the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So it's nothing to do with successorship because he predeceased the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So how could it mean succession? It can't mean succession. And the Prophet ﷺ died before Ali, so the analogy between the two wouldn't make sense. What it's referring to, all of the scholars of Muslim Orthodoxy state that the hadith stated was at the time when Ali was told to stay behind in Medina to watch over the believers. And the Prophet ﷺ marched out in battle. That's the same thing that happened when the Prophet Musa ﷺ went on the Mount of Sinai for 40 days and left Harun in charge of the people during that time. That's it. That's all it had to do with. And when you look at the households today of the Prophet ﷺ and how the Shia view things, they will say, well, these ahadith are definite proofs and evidence that this particular hadith that I leave behind you two things, the Qur'an in my household, or the Book of Allah in my household. That's true, but there's also another narration where the Prophet ﷺ explained further, and he said, my Sunnah. And so the members of his household will be the most knowledgeable of the Sunnah. And we find that with Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, he's related to the Prophet ﷺ. We find these people they're related to, and we find a huge amount of scholars that are from Ahlul Bayt. So it doesn't take away from the position that the Ahlul Bayt are held in high regard, but it has nothing to do with Ali being the immediate successor. And then finally, the hadith that they'll quote is, there shall be 12 Khalifas after me. The hadith in Sahih Muslim. And they say this is the definite proof of the infallible imams, the infallible 12 imams that will come. The problem is this hadith in Sahih Muslim is worded Khalifas, not imams. It's worded Khalifas. And there's no mention or commentary of anyone being held to be infallible. So when you're having a discussion, or when you're reading, or when you're subjected to Shia beliefs, you have to always use your skills of discernment. Because the documentation that they're going to quote to you from Sunni sources will 9 times out of 10 be correct, but it will not be in its proper context. And so the questions you need to ask yourself is, what is the literature that they're quoting to me? Is it Sunni literature? Yes, it is. That's accepted. Number 2, what are they trying to prove to me? And number 3, what is the actual context of the documentation that they're quoting, which will require you to go and do research. But it's important to know this. So they began to celebrate Eid al-Ghadir Khum. Prior to then, there were no celebrations. So our question is, if the Shia creed was the original creed of the first 3 generations,